Be the Talk, episode 336, featuring Claire Ashman. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Claire Ashman. Claire, are you ready to talk?
Absolutely. Any time of the day.
4-time TEDx speaker and cult survivor, not once but twice, Claire Ashman has shared her hard-won inner wisdom with audiences all over the world. Claire's deep psychological awareness shines through her writing and speaking. Claire Ashman, welcome to the talk.
Thank you for having me.
Well, your talk, the one that I most recently viewed, is called Lessons from a Cult Survivor. Pretty plain right there. You mentioned a few really neat things in your talk. You basically mentioned that we have a void in our lives, and some more than others. And for some people, not other people fill that void with their love and their listening and their valuing of others, but actually cults fill that void for some people. But we can choose to care about other people and value other people so that those other cults do not have to fill the void. That's basically my summary of your talk, Claire. Please take us behind that talk as well as any of the other talks that you've done.
Well, it is true in that, like, for me personally, I was actually brought up in a sect, a very strict religious sect, and I was very isolated and insular, being homeschooled and without any kind of media or outside influence. And then I married due to that, and, you know, being socially backward, socially naive, I married young to a guy who was much older than me.
Inside of the cult or elsewhere?
Well, he was part of that sect that I'd grown up in.
Okay.
And then, unbeknownst to me, he believed in end of world theories. And so this happens a lot in these groups, in that people are seeking. So my ex-husband was seeking for answers to the end of the world and what was supposedly going to happen. And he was seeking for a group whereby he could feel like family, because in his mind, and bear in mind, my ex-husband had some mental health issues, which I found out much later on. But he was seeking for a group that all believed the same, did the same, dressed the same, thought the same. And he felt, for him, it cushioned him and it made him feel safe. Now, it was a similar thing for my mother. With her being part of the sect that I grew up in, she felt that same comfort as well. Oftentimes you find that in these groups, the people that join, they're looking for that. They're just looking for someone, you know, they're looking for that love. They're looking for that cushion just to keep them safe.
Well, and we're all tribal people. So yeah. This is just maybe a few notches more extreme than most of us.
Yes.
Normally, whoever you're following on the internet or whoever's podcast, I mean, all of that. This isn't as far gone, perhaps, as we would think, because we're all tribal. We're all looking for a place to belong. Some of us have a harder time belonging than others, and then these doors can open up and sometimes go into not good places. So, don't mean to interject that, but please go on.
That's definitely true. So for me, basically, it was, I was part of the actual cult for like 10 years. And then it was me that ended up by, cracking it open, in that I started writing letters. And I mentioned this in my third TEDx talk at Norwich. How I started writing letters and challenging the cult leader's authority. And he didn't like that. And so we ended up, over time, that brought about a series of events whereby we got evicted by the local sheriff. And I don't want anybody going, oh my God, you got evicted. How terrible was that? It was actually the best thing that happened. And my kids and I were so happy about it.
Claire, if I can just establish a little bit of a timeline. So you mentioned that you were brought up in a cult. You mentioned a period of 10 years, but fast forwarding, now you're mentioning you and your children. So this was a little bit longer than 10 years, obviously. Can you quickly kind of bring us in your timeline quickly? All right.
I'll do bullet point. So basically, from the age of 4 to 20, I was in a very religious, strict sect. Then from 20 to 26, I was still like very controlled by my husband, and we'd had a few kids by then, and we were living in the city, but still practicing strict Catholicism. And then from the time I was 26 to the time I was 36, we lived in an actual cult that was, we were all living on the one property that was surrounded by barbed wire fences and padlock gates.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
So it was the kind of thing where you kind of brought up in a cult and then you kind of got out and then you were susceptible in this relationship and then went back into a form of that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't like those 6 years I was free, so to speak. It was kind of like a sidestep. So I was living in the suburbs with my ex-husband, but still very insular within that.
Okay. And I can appreciate this. I wasn't anywhere close to a cult, but I have a pretty traditional, religious background. And there were people in my pretty orthodox background, and there were some people that were a couple of notches closer to the fringe, and some belief systems and some things like that where you could definitely be a little concerned. I'll just put it that way. And I'm not trying to polarize or sensationalize. I'm just trying to be as matter of fact as I can be. So this is really valuable. And again, I mean, your central point that just valuing people and having maybe alternative ways so that people can belong in our really fractured yet tribal society where we all have these needs to connect. Can you speak to that? Because I think that's something that we can all do to reach out to people. Earlier today, I interviewed someone who advocates something that might be a little bit related in terms of mental health, reaching out, diagnosing when it's early instead of when it's stage 2, 3, 4. I almost see this in kind of a similar way. I'm not trying to equate it, but if we reach out to people as they're starting to perhaps drift and reach out and become good humans, better humans, and do that earlier, then there's a whole lot less consequence later. What can we do to be reaching out, and what have you been doing?
Well, for me personally, firstly, I've been doing some study into these groups. So there's various what we term new religious movements around the world in every country. Now, just because we use the term cult doesn't necessarily mean that it's evil or it's going to end in suicide or murder. So personally, what we can do is that we can have a better understanding of these groups and of their beliefs and practices. So when you do notice that your friend or family member is getting involved, or maybe has, like, as you so aptly put it before, they've got a belief system, but it's gone up a couple of notches and it's more towards the fringe, is to interact with them and talk to them and be friends with them. You don't have to agree with their actual belief system or their practices, but by being understanding of it and actually asking questions, they don't feel so weird, and then they don't end up by being really secretive and kind of going right off the rails and thinking, oh my God, so-and-so, they're asking me 20 questions, they're doing the Spanish Inquisition, they're not understanding how I'm feeling, because a lot of these people are seekers. They're seeking to fill a void within. Now, if we can actually be understanding and be helpful, and this is not just beforehand, but this is also after people come out, because that's when I personally found it very difficult, because people would ask me where I came from and, because the town that I was living in, the cult the cult group is on one side of this defence town. So obviously you have defence coming in and out, and the school that the children were going to, they were a lovely school, very supportive and helpful. Now, people would ask me, oh, how long have you been here? Because they assumed that I was part of defence or my husband was, so that I'd only just moved there. And it became increasingly difficult not to talk about 10 years of my life. And because I was embarrassed and I was humiliated because I had never wanted to move there in the first place. I was forced to by my ex-husband. Now, the thing is that when I started talking about it, I felt very ashamed and very humiliated, and I didn't know how to go about actually talking about it. But then I found that people were more supportive than I thought and that I had expected. And in meeting other, cult survivors or people who have come out of new religious movements or strict kind of controlled groups, I have found a similar theme. They feel really embarrassed to talk about it, and therefore it makes it very difficult to make connections in the world, to make friends, and ultimately to get jobs and move on. And so for me, I like to be that connecting person to say, hey, don't look at these people as being weird. They've actually got quite a few talents and gifts that they have learned through their experience, and it can actually be transformed and used in a workspace.
I am just a little silent because I'm thinking of a lot of different things and different connections of different groups. I mean, I'm thinking about anybody who is in a major transition in life. I'm thinking about maybe military people who become civilians and there's a new culture. I'm thinking about people who are incarcerated, rightfully or wrongfully, and now they're free. And it's like, what do they do now? Claire, where I live here in the United States, one county over, I can drive up the road and 20 minutes later, I'm in Amish country where they don't use electricity. And some of the young people don't want to be part of that community anymore. And so they have to make up for a real lack of education many times and transition back into the modern world. So I think a lot of the lessons that we get from your TEDx talk are really very, very applicable in that slightly broader sense. Is this stuff that you think about as well?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I've been contacted by women, especially all around the world, who have seen my TEDx talks, and they're just like, thank you so much for speaking out, because you're an inspiration in being able to tell the world, explain to the world what it's like to be behind closed doors or behind barbed wire fences and then to come out. And you're so right. It can be the military as well. It can be, and I mean, I have two sons in the military. It can be those who are incarcerated and coming out. It's that in-between crack where you're stepping out and you're feeling really shaky and you don't know. And I mean, I can literally think of that now, how awkward I was socially, how difficult it was for me to make conversation, to even know what to wear when invited to a barbecue. Or I'm out to even having coffee with someone. I so desperately wanted to connect, and I found it so difficult. It was really, really hard.
I'm just thinking, Talk Universe in one word: curiosity. I think if we can employ curiosity and two words, this is a little bit of a training term or psychological thing, but appreciative inquiry, which basically means to have a really curious mindset, not to judge, and just to ask questions and really, really appreciate that the person is interacting with you no matter what they say, and really practice not judging and not reacting, but just really welcoming and making that person welcome. I think that there are some simple ways to really put into practice what Claire has learned. And I mean, we didn't even get into how did you survive after you left your family structure, and and with I believe you had somewhere around 8 or 9 children, if I remember
Yes.
correctly from your talk. So this wasn't just you. This is lessons for especially women everywhere who are in those kinds of difficult situations. I bet it's just been an amazing encouragement to them as well for you to hear back from them. Can you tell us, before we pivot over to the Blitz round, can you give us just a case study or two?
Well, for me, when I left the cult, I was 36 and I had 8 children, age 16 down to 2. And so it's been a real, for me, like that has really been a real touch point for other women as well, because they've said, like if you can do it with 8 children and totally turn your life around, well, then I can too. And that's what I have been able to teach and what I do teach. And, like I was just conversing with a lady this morning who left a very strict insular group only a couple of years ago. She's got young children, and I've been able, like, she hadn't seen any of my TEDx talks, actually. She'd seen another interview that I'd done. She said she was halfway through the interview and she thought, I have to find this girl. She is talking my talk. And she connected with me and we spoke on the phone, and she said, you are the first person that actually says, I hear you, I validate you. You understand what I've been through. And do you know, it really makes my heart warm to know that I can do that. I can actually help people, and I love doing it. I absolutely do.
Well, we are enjoying this talk with Claire Ashman. She is a 4-time TEDx talker. Her talk that we're talking about is called Lessons from a Cult Survivor. And we're going to pivot over to you, Talk Universe, in just a moment for the Blitz round. Hey, Talk Universe. I hope you've been enjoying today's episode with today's guest. But you know what? Many people want more than that. Many people that listen to Be the Talk actually want to give a talk. And if that's you, you're not alone. Listen to the rest of this podcast. At the end, I'll have a free resource for you just for listening. And we're back with Claire Ashman. It is time for the Blitz round. I'm going to ask you a series of either or questions related to the preparation and performance of your recent 4 TEDx talks. Are you ready, Claire?
Absolutely. Go for it.
All right. First off, were you invited or did you apply?
I applied for 3 and then got asked for the 4th.
What's your advice for those of us out there, the masses of us that are trying to get accepted right now?
Be true to you and talk about what you know, and make sure you do good preparation.
Yeah. And when you get up to speak and prepare, are you a memorizer, improviser, or a blender, Claire?
I'm a blender in a way where for me, I tend to use bullet points in my head and then expand on those, and I know what I'm going to expand on.
Are you?
So that's what I tend to.
Have you been a opener, closer, or in between?
I'm very open when I talk. I like doing that. Well, I think if you are
first,
open,
I mean, were you first? Were you last, or were you in between? Is what I mean. And you've done 4 of these, so you've probably done all 3.
Actually, no, no. I have.
Where do they normally put you?
They've put me early afternoon and then second to last.
Okay, so they put you right in the middle.
Yes, and look, the second to last, if you're last or second to last, it makes it really hard to enjoy the rest of the day.
Oh, yeah.
So, I prefer, I wouldn't like to be an opener, but I'd like to be in the morning.
Yeah. Well, Claire tells the truth, because I was a closer. I was all the way last, and the guy a couple before me sold like 20 million books 2 years prior. I was like, have him close. He'll keep the people in the room, but they wanted me to close. So go figure. What's your advice to those people who are second to last, Claire?
Oh, God.
You might have heard it right there.
Look,
try not to be second to last.
the thing is, it depends on the organisers. Like, I mean, for me, with my last one, which is not out yet, should be soon, but they had me second to last for a reason. It ended up that they had 2 sessions. Normally you have to be, the audience has to be there for the whole day. But this time they made it a morning session and an afternoon session. The afternoon session sold out before the morning session because of me. And I was really, and I mean, that was, so they put me second to last, and there were so many people in the room afterwards.
They keep the people in the room. If they came because of you, if they put you first, then everybody leaves at the first break is how these things work. So,
that's it.
That's why it's so important when you get accepted. You got to play by the rules, try to be the best speaker, play nice with others, and try to help the whole team out. So, good for you. Good for you, Claire. Can you just comment? I mean, I think it's pretty evident. So it's almost like a no-brainer or a dumb question of me to ask you, the power of the vehicle of the TEDx talk to share your authentic truth and your story. Do it in a way that you got this wonderful YouTube vehicle of the TEDx YouTube channel where millions and millions of people are watching these talks. What did that do for you way back to the first talk that you ever gave?
Well, see, for me personally, I love the audience. I love giving talks where there's audience participation. Obviously, there's not audience participation when you give a TEDx talk, like as in them asking questions. But the warmth and the acceptance that you feel from the audience. Like, I mean, with my Norwich talk, I got a standing ovation, and that absolutely made me cry. And then for my 4th talk, which was just in August in Melbourne in Australia, I feel that was my best talk ever. And the audience was so supportive and warm and understanding. And I guess I revealed more of myself in that talk. And for me, it's really helped me to be able to help more people and bring what I do out into the open. And I did release my first memoir. It's called Lessons of a Cult Survivor, and I self-published that in August, and that is available on Amazon for anybody that wants to read the full story. Oh, that's excellent. So if we don't already have the link, we will put that in the show notes. We've been enjoying this conversation and actually this blitz round with Claire Ashman. Her talk is called Lessons from a Cult Survivor. You can find out more about Claire at claireashman.com. And yes, I see the link for the book right there. We will have that on our show notes page at Be The Talk. So you can go to BeTheTalk.com, watch Claire's talk on the link, connect with Claire, and we're going to be right back in just a moment with Claire Ashman for the final word of advice. Hey, Talk Universe, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you want to give the talk to change the world, but you don't know how or even where to start, no problem at all. Go to BeTheTalk.com/get accepted for my new 5-day email course that'll show you how. Absolutely free. Just go to BeTheTalk.com/get accepted. And we're back with Claire Ashman. It is time for the final word of advice. Right. Well, final word of advice is, firstly, always be true to you. Listen to your intuition. And as you so aptly put it before, is having that appreciative curiosity about others, and the understanding as well. Just be a good listener. And I mean, that can go for anybody. And I think that we would make the world a whole better place if we could do that. I can't agree more. And thank you so much, Claire Ashman, for carving out time in your busy schedule today to come on the talk and share your wisdom with Talk Universe. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Be The Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.